When Dung received the call from his cousin saying their grandmother had passed, he immediately caught a night bus back to the village. Kodu village lay deep in the Midlands, its roads winding and narrow, flanked by dense forest on both sides. He hadn't returned in over 15 years, not since the tragedy that no one in the family liked to mention. His mother had died in an accident, his father had disappeared, and his grandmother was the last to remain in the old 3-room wooden house at the end of the hamlet. The last time Dung saw her, she had told him, "When you feel like you no longer belong anywhere, come back and light me a stick of incense. Then look up at the altar." It was raining that night. The bus left him at the village gate, and he walked nearly 3 kilometers through the dark. The village was pitch black, no streetlights, just the scent of wet earth and the hum of insects echoing from the undergrowth. When he reached the house, the front door was unlocked. In the center room, the altar had already been prepared. His grandmother's portrait stood in the middle, incense still smoldering faintly. Someone had recently lit it. But it wasn't the photo that chilled him. It was the eye in the porcelain bowl placed in front of it. Not a glass eye. A real one, cloudy black, perfectly round and moist as if it had just been removed from a living body. He backed away instinctively, but then told himself it must be some cruel prank. He tidied the place up, snapped a photo to send to his cousin, but the message wouldn't send. No signal. Weak reception. That night, he slept in the left bedroom, the one he used as a child. The wind blew through the wooden slats, the roof creaked. But around midnight, he was woken by a tapping sound on the altar. Tap, 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 soft, deliberate, like someone gently rapping with a fingernail. Then came a low murmur, indistinct. Not a voice, but a vibration. He stepped out. The house was empty, but the porcelain bowl had been knocked over. The eye had rolled to the edge of the altar, as if it had moved on its own. He wrapped it in tissue, placed it back in the bowl. The next morning, villagers came to pay respects. They looked at him strangely. An old woman took his hand and asked in a whisper, "You saw the eye, didn't you?" Dung nodded. She lowered her gaze. "Then you must not leave until the 7th night. That's the rule. The eye has chosen you." Dung didn't understand, but all day anyone passing by avoided looking at the altar. Some even walked around the back of the house, unwilling to enter the central room. That night, he dreamed of standing in front of the altar. The eye was blinking, slowly. Then it opened wide. Then it turned and looked at him. The dream looped endlessly, and each time he tried to wake, he was pulled back to the same point. The altar, the eye, the gaze, drilling into his skull. By the 3rd awakening, he realized it wasn't a dream. He was actually standing in front of the altar, at midnight. No one had called him. No one had shaken him awake. He simply opened his eyes, and he was there. From the 3rd day onward, strange sounds filled the house, dragging chairs, doors creaking open, the sound of barefoot steps on dirt. He placed his phone on the altar to record video overnight. The next morning, he found a 17-minute clip. In the dim footage, a tall, thin figure stood silently behind the altar. It didn't move. But when he slowed the video frame by frame, the figure blinked, and the blinking was synchronized with the eye inside the bowl. He vomited into the kitchen sink. That night, Mr. Tu, a friend of his grandmother, came knocking. "Your mother saw the eye too," he said quietly. "But your grandmother kept it secret, didn't want others to know. She's been guarding this ritual since your great-grandfather's time. It's called the third eye ritual. That eye didn't come from the dead. It came from something that lived here before us." Dung asked why no one destroyed it. Mr. Tu shook his head. "Because it's not dead. One person per generation sees it. Once they've seen it, the gaze stays with them forever. If they don't follow the ritual correctly, it will take back what it gave." Dung began to unravel. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He spent his days staring into the porcelain bowl. The eye inside began to change, its iris turning yellow, streaks of red crawling into the pupil. When he leaned close, he saw a reflection in the pupil, himself standing exactly where he stood. But the reflection was smiling. On the 5th night, he saw his mother, not in a dream. She was standing at the doorway, one hand on the frame, hair down to her waist, eyes wide open. He rushed toward her, but she said nothing. She stared directly at the altar, then turned and vanished into the darkness. He chased her to the end of the alley, but there was nothing, only fog, and the long, steady howling of dogs. On the sixth night, Dung tried to leave. He packed his bags and walked toward the main road. But as he crossed the village gate, his head exploded with pain. His ears rang, his vision blurred, and he saw his own eye drop to the ground. Not literally, but it felt too real. He collapsed. Villagers ran to him, dragged him back, tied him to the center post of the house, and stuffed cloth into his mouth. They began the ritual. Drums beat. Incense smoke filled the air. They chanted around the altar. At precisely 3 a.m., the eye in the porcelain bowl began to tremble, then emit smoke, and then it vanished. Outside the house, footsteps could be heard walking off the porch, slow, deliberate, as though something had finally left its home. The next morning, the altar was empty. The bowl shattered. Dung lay unconscious on the floor. His eyes were still in their sockets. But if you looked closely, deep into the pupils, they no longer belonged to a man. Kwa began having the same dream on the night of his 27th birthday. He remembered it clearly because he didn't celebrate. No party, no birthday wishes, no music or fireworks. Just an open can of beer on the table and an old song playing on loop from his phone. It had started to rain when he fell asleep. And then he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in a long hallway with pale gray walls, a low ceiling, and flickering fluorescent lights. There were no windows, only a scattering of black wooden doors lining the corridor. The doors had no handles, no numbers. He walked slowly past each one, unable to open any. The floor was damp, like it had just been mopped but never dried. The dripping sound of water echoed all around him. Nothing felt particularly strange until he reached the final door. On its surface, smeared in something like soot or ash, were the words, "Fourth Dream." Then he woke up, heart racing, shirt soaked in cold sweat. The next day, he felt unusually exhausted, as if he hadn't slept at all, despite getting 8 hours of rest. But he shrugged it off. It wasn't until the second night, when the exact same dream replayed, same hallway, same lights, same door with the same message, that the unease began to grow. He woke again at 3 a.m., wrote down every detail, and tried to convince himself it was a coincidence. On the third night, the hallway had grown longer. There was a wooden chair sitting in the middle. On the chair was a cloth doll with its eyes sewn shut with black thread. Its hands rested in its lap, mouth twisted into an uneven smile. As Koa passed it, the doll tilted its head toward him. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But its invisible gaze followed his every step until he reached the final door again, the one labeled Fourth Dream. And on the fourth night, he wasn't in the hallway anymore. He was inside the room behind that door. A pitch-black chamber. No light. No sound. But somehow he could still see. He saw himself sitting in the center of the room. Hands bound, mouth gagged, eyes wide, silently pleading. He tried to scream, but no sound came. A cold, wet hand rested on his shoulder from behind. And after a long, suffocating pause, a voice whispered, "It has begun." Koa shot up in bed. The clock read 3:04 a.m. His heart felt like it was trying to burst through his ribs. He flipped on the lights, but they flickered once and died. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection stared back, but the eyes in the mirror did not blink. The next day, he visited a doctor. They prescribed sleeping pills and recommended stress relief. He took the pills, cut caffeine, turned off all screens before bed. But on the fifth night, the dream came before he even fell asleep. The moment he closed his eyes, it pulled him in. No hallway, no door. Just a barren field with cracked soil stretching endlessly under a sunless sky. Metal poles rose from the ground, each hung with fabric effigies, scarecrows, rag dolls, human-like figures, each with his face. One smiled, one wept, one looked charred like it had been set on fire. He turned to run, but the sky turned blood red. The wind howled like screaming voices, and from beneath the earth, hands burst upward, grabbing his ankles. He woke up screaming, legs covered in cuts. From then on, each night was a new descent. The dream was no longer a dream. It was a place, a presence, a thing with awareness. It knew he was afraid. It sent him alternate versions of himself, in mirrors, in static-filled voices on his phone, in whispers behind him while he showered. You've seen what was forbidden. You've gone too deep. You are awake inside your dream. Kwa began journaling. Each dream was a layer. On the seventh night, he was trapped in a room made of mirrors. Every wall reflected a different self. One was carving open his stomach. One was hanging from the ceiling. One sat motionless, bleeding from the eyes. All of them stared at him and spoke in unison. The fourth dream never ends. He smashed every mirror in his apartment, unplugged all electronics. It didn't help, because by the 10th night, he couldn't wake up anymore. People said he still went to work, still answered calls, but he had no memory of it. He only knew the dreams continued, one inside another. Sometimes he was the dreamer. Sometimes he was the dream. He often found himself watching someone asleep in a room, someone lying in a bed that looked all too familiar. It was himself. He was dreaming of a man dreaming of a man dreaming. And always behind him, the same whisper, awake or asleep, it makes no difference.